We're now going to look at other senses that you may or may not have heard of. Starting out with electrical communication. This is very prominent in a variety of species, especially species of shark, and this goblin shark in particular has an enormous amount of electroreceptors in the head area.
Out of nowhere, a bizarre-looking animal appears. A goblin shark, one of the creepiest, most alien species ever recorded. These guys were discovered in the late 19th century, but only now are their secrets being revealed. Their snouts are peppered with sensors that can pick up even the tiniest flow of electric current. And all living things have some current running through their bodies. There's no place to hide. Like a metal detector, the shark sweeps its nose over the seabed for as little as 1/10,000,000th of a volt. But that's nothing compared to what the goblin shark can do with its jaw.
Instead of the shark moving out, the jaw comes out. It's aggressive and it goes quick. The jaw comes out and grabs things like that. This is the first time that we've captured the goblin shark actually capturing prey underwater. It's mind-blowing.
So, nervous systems produce electricity. That's how the action potential or the nerve impulse works. It's a bioelectrical event. And so that is the way that sharks are, at least in part, able to locate prey. Here again we have the goblin shark in this animated GIF that is swallowing prey. So sharks in general have electroreceptors, as do eels, so they're able to locate prey as well. And even the duck-billed platypus can electrolocate prey because of electroreceptors in its head area. Now it turns out that electric eels typically will emit a low voltage discharge if they're not looking for prey, but if there's prey in the vicinity, they'll switch to a high voltage discharge, which actually can incapacitate the prey. So watch very carefully in these three very brief segments. Here's clip number 1. There's a prey fish up in the upper portion coming in. When you see red flashes, that's the high voltage discharge. There. Watch, see the prey stops moving and the eel is able to get it. Okay, once again, the red, by the way, is added by the experimenters. There. And the prey stops moving. It's been incapacitated. One more time. There. And the prey stops moving. And the eel gets it. Now, down in the Amazon River in South America live a variety of species of gymnotiformes, or weakly electric knife fish. These are highly territorial animals, and they produce electric organ discharges continuously. These are known as EODs, electric organ discharge. And the thing about it is individuals have very unique pulses, so they can identify individuals of their own species just by the kind of EOD that that individual is putting out. And just to show you what I mean by that, so here we have a bunch of individuals. Some of these might actually be different species. But you can see that here we have the electric discharge, starting with a downward sweep and an upward sweep. But notice this one has the upward sweep followed by a downward sweep. And notice that the temporal aspect of this, it's a gradual upward, downward, and then back to the baseline, and so on. So each one is unique. And they can actually adjust these EODs to avoid predators. So normally they produce these biphasic signals, as we saw in the last slide. There's either a downward sweep followed by an upward sweep, or an upward sweep followed by a downward sweep. In other words, it's biphasic. phasic either way, up and down or down and up. But it turns out that those electrical discharges are easily detected by predators that are able to key in on this form of electric information. So if there are predators in the vicinity, they suddenly switch to a monophasic signal. So you see here there's only an upward sweep. I don't know if some only do a downward. I'm guessing no. So in any event, it's monophasic, not biphasic. Now the good thing about this is that conspecifics can still detect this, but the predators have a very difficult time locating these weakly electric knifefish as a meal. Okay, here's another sense, the magnetic sense. We see this in turtles that migrate, and so they'll use the Earth's magnetic fields to aid in migration. This is a loggerhead sea turtle. And basically they can, like I said, migrate to different areas just by following the Earth's magnetic fields. And, they have general migration routes that they follow routinely. So they're just not randomly swimming from one area to another. So a lab study was done, pretty interesting, where they actually created a tank that enabled the researchers to redirect the electric fields of these young naive turtles to see what would happen. So there's their test tank. And they lined it with various coils that could then generate different types of magnetic fields. And they would see where these turtles would go when they're inside this tank in accord with each electrical magnetic field, not electrical, magnetic field. So they had one magnetic field situation that would actually be the northern Florida orientation. There's northern Florida. And so generally the real magnetic field in the Earth is going like in this general direction around North Florida. So notice when they simulate that and they look at where the turtles are going, each of those dots being the orientation of a different turtle, they're generally conforming to that general direction. It's not perfect, but notice that there are many fewer turtles that are going over in this area than there are in this area. And the northeastern gyre, which now has them going in a southerly direction, so when they simulate that, notice that that is pretty much what the turtles are doing in this tank. And finally, when they simulate the southern gyre, so notice they're now going back over in the west-northwest direction, that's exactly what the turtles are doing under that simulation. So magnetic sensitivity plays a huge role in turtle migratory activity. Homing pigeons also can use magnetic fields. They have a substance in their brain it's been called magnetite, actually, is what it's been named, because it seems to be sensitive to magnetic fields. And the idea is, since they are homing pigeons, that these fields might enable them to go from one place to the next just by following the magnetic fields. Now, of course, they're going to be using other senses as well. Magnetic sense is only one. There are some species of birds that migrate at night, like garden warblers and European robins. And again, they have a variety of means of migrating. They can use stars, they can use other kinds of cues to migrate, but they also can use a magnetic sense.
This bird has enhanced night vision and an internal compass that can sense the invisible magnetic field surrounding the Earth.
Birds do head scans in order to sense the Earth's magnetic field. So they turn their head sort of from left to right and then from right to left.
As he wrote in Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, Morrison set up cages with garden warblers and European robins. During the day, they moved around aimlessly, but at night, the birds all behaved in a very distinctive way.
These birds will sit and fly on the perch, so to say, in the direction in which they wanted to fly outside.
Comparing the birds' brains to non-migrating zebra finches, Duke University biologist Eric Jarvis discovered that the region at the front of the brain was only active at night. Jarvis says although we may have a brain area like this, it's certainly not as developed as in these birds.
So that's pretty interesting. They're calling this cluster N, and that's the area, the whitish area that becomes active only at night, and that plays a role in magnetic sensitivity to aid nighttime migration. Now, magnetic noise can actually disrupt this in migratory birds, like the European robin, for example. Especially around cities where there's so much electricity that's being generated. Every time you turn on a switch, basically, you are causing a form of magnetic noise. And if animals are trying to use magnetic fields as a way of getting from place to place, and you're creating all this noise, obviously it can greatly disrupt their activity.
Migratory birds can sense the Earth's magnetic field. They use this inbuilt compass along with visual cues like the sun and stars to help them fly in the right direction. For decades, people have wondered whether electromagnetic noise made by humans could be interfering with birds' magnetic compass. Now scientists in Germany have shown that in robins, at least, this appears to be true.
Anthropogenic electromagnetic noise is everywhere because every piece of equipment with a plug, when you plug it in, it's going to make electromagnetic noise in some frequency range. If you could sense this electromagnetic noise, it will probably be like some kind of rock concert going on all the time.
For 3 years, Henrik and his colleagues couldn't see their robins jumping in the right direction.
We were desperate to make this experiment work, so for 3 years we tried all kinds of things to make this experiment work, but nothing changed it. They were disoriented. Until one day a postdoc of mine, Niels Lasse Schneider, got the idea to screen the wooden huts on the inside with aluminium plates and connect them to a lightning rod.
By screening the huts with aluminium, the researchers blocked man-made electromagnetic noise from entering the hut. When they switched the screening on, the robins suddenly oriented.
So this is one of the experimental huts that we use for our experiments. And what's fascinating is that the grounding down here can actually be connected and disconnected just by unscrewing this screw. And this means that if you unscrew this screw, the birds inside this hut will be feeling all the electromagnetic disturbances and they will not orient. If I reconnect the screw so that the aluminium screens inside are connected, then the birds inside this hut will orient. So basically I can turn on and off the orientation of the birds by either connecting or disconnecting this screw.
So how much of a problem is electromagnetic noise for birds which migrate?
It may be a very localized effect that only affects them as long as they are in towns and cities, and the moment they're outside of town, they are fine. And one thing is certainly important to realize again is that birds have many different navigation systems and they have backup systems. So if the magnetic compass doesn't work, they can use the sun compass, the star compass, the landmarks should still be fine, and so on. So we don't know how large this effect is.
This is an interesting finding about how animals align themselves, while only certain animals actually, apparently, I don't know how carefully this has been looked at in a wide variety of species, but tend to align themselves according to magnetic fields when grazing and resting. And this has been identified actually by looking at Google Earth. And so the alignment is usually north to south. And so here it's been found in cattle, in roe deer, and in red deer that align themselves along a north-south axis while grazing and resting. And guess what? The same thing with dogs while they're defecating and urinating, a north to south alignment. So I checked this out in my dog after I read this article, and sure enough, it's pretty reliable. I see it a little bit more with defecation than urination, but it shows up there as well. Now, there have been some people that have suggested that disruptions in the Earth's magnetic fields is what cause cetaceans like whales and dolphins to often beach themselves. It's known that there are certain areas along the coast, I'm thinking about the east coast of the United States, that are a little bit more disrupted. It could very well be from human activity, hard to tell. And those are areas that there seem to be repeated beaching by whales and dolphins. But there's a lot more research that's necessary to identify that because, like everything else, probably there are multiple causes for this kind of activity. What about us? Well, magnetic material has in fact been found in our hippocampus, which is hugely involved in spatial learning. So that's important. That's navigating, basically. And an experiment was done over in England where they took students at a British university and they put them all in a bus, many buses actually, and they had to wear blindfolds, and tucked inside the blindfolds were magnets, which, of course, if we have a magnetic sense that we actually use, would disrupt that magnetic sense. Then they had a control group of other students that they were put in buses as well, and they had blindfolds as well. But in their blindfolds were just some pieces of brass, just to control for having to wear the blindfolds and having some kind of solid object tucked inside the blindfolds. Now, brass will not disrupt magnetic fields. So these buses are all starting out at the university, and they're driving along all kinds of twisty, windy routes at different distances away from the university, and then the students are allowed out of the bus, and their task is to simply point to where they think the university is. So that was all the subjects had to do. Okay, here are the data. The ones wearing brass did a very good job. There's some variability, but the university is home, and so if they're driven northwest, they point back to home. Again, a couple screw-ups over there, and northeast point back to home, and so on and so forth with these other ones. So they actually are using some kind of a magnetic sense in order to do this because brass is not interfering with that. And they ruled out other things like the sun position and stuff like that. But look at the ones with magnets, and so they're pointing all over the place. They cannot orient directly. So apparently we may very well have some kind of a magnetic sense. At least that's what this experiment suggests. I should add that there have been problems replicating this study, even though it was published in one of the two most highly respected international science journals, Nature. But there have been some issues with this. But again, I think a lot more work needs to be done, especially in the human domain. Now, another type of sense, surface wave communication. Probably haven't heard of that. Surface wave communication is pretty unique to a very small number of animals, in particular water striders. And here we have a water strider. They sit on top of the water, and they generate waves. Those waves are picked up by other water striders. So you can see the waves very clearly. Here's a film, very short, showing how they generate these wave patterns that can then be detected by surface wave detectors on the feet of other water striders. So they can communicate that way. And it turns out, for example, they can discriminate one sex from another because males have a higher frequency wave than do females. In other words, there's more waves per unit time, or per area, I guess I should say, for the male than there are for the females. So they can tell one sex from the other and use that, maybe along with other senses, I'm not sure, for courtship. Dome pressure receptors, another sense. This is found in alligators and crocodiles. So here we have a crocodile, and it's all of those dots, mostly around the mouth area. Here, we'll zoom in on that. Each of these little black dots around the mouth, those are dome pressure receptors. So notice, for example, in this study that was done, they put a drop of water. There's a young crocodile sitting on the surface of the water, so its mouth is like half underwater and half above water, so it can detect disturbances in the water by these dome pressure receptors. And then they just drop something in the water to create a water droplet, and then watch what the young crocodile does. It orients directly toward that. So basically, they can use this sense to locate prey that is disturbing the surface of the water. And just to drive that home, So what they found was that, yes, when the head is positioned properly, so, the mouth is sort of straddling the water, a little bit above, maybe a little bit below, but the dome pressure receptors are actually touching the water surface, that they will orient correctly to a drop of water, or drop of object, rather. Drop of object creating the wave in the water. If their head is above water, but the body's in the water, but their head is lifted above water, you don't see any orientation because the dome pressure receptor is not being stimulated. And the same if they're entirely underwater, they won't show any orientation because the waves are on the surface of the water. Dome pressure receptors. So those are some senses that you may or may not have heard of, but that do play a role in certain species of animals.